So a very good afternoon and good morning to all of you who are joining. So I think slowly people will start joining. We will start in the next 5 minutes for those who are joining right now. We already have Eli with us. So we'll just wait for the participants to join and then we'll get started.
Okay, so Rajiv and Vijeta, I am ready to begin whenever you think we should, but I see we have only 8 participants with us. So we should maybe wait till a few more join.
Yes.
Wonderful.
So Eli, we have 8 participants.
I see.
Yeah. So Vijeta, you can just put off the mic. You're on mute of the participants. So we have 8 participants in Zoom and 9 right now, and we have around 7 of them in the platform.
I see. Okay. So we actually have about 15, 16. All right. Well, if you want to wait a couple more minutes, we can do that. That's not a problem.
Okay, so a very good morning. So we already have around 20 participants in Zoom and in the platform. A very good morning and a very good evening to participants from various places. So we have participants from across the globe. We have with us Eli Eaton, who is an innovation consultant with Northern Star. My name is Rajiv Mukherjee. I am the CEO of Incubate Hub. Incubate Hub is Asia's largest open innovation platform. We work with a lot of corporate driving their corporate innovation programs, open innovation challenges, corporate accelerator programs. And we are glad to have Eli with us. Eli is one of the experts in systematic inventive thinking. He has been driving corporate innovation for the last 10 to 12 years, working with Amdocs and then consulting various corporates on corporate innovation, on entrepreneurship, on emerging technologies. So I would like to invite Eli to give an introduction, and let's get started.
Wonderful.
Over to you, Eli.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Rajiv, for the introduction, and welcome to everybody who's joining us from around the globe for this very engaging and exciting webinar. So I hope we're going to be looking at how to systematically create inventive solutions and drive transformation using systematic inventive thinking methodology, which of course I will explain in a moment. So first of all, I just want to say hello from Australia. I am broadcasting to you from Sydney, Australia, where I am based after having worked internationally for the last 20 years, including 17 years in Israel as part of the Israeli innovative ecosystem, and in a number of other countries as well. I am happy to be back in my home of Australia. And before we begin, and I'll give you a bit more background and the agenda, I just want to do a very quick quiz with you. And it's about breaking fixedness, which is a key aspect of systematic inventive thinking, but is also very important when we are in transformational periods and we have to think of new ways to deal with new emerging problems. So what I'm going to do is this is going to ask you to be a bit interactive and use your chat. I'm going to ask you to forget your current role and imagine that you are the CEO of China Railway Systems, and you have the following problem ahead of you. You have a train journey that goes from one end of China to another, from east to west and west to east. And it's about a 6,000-mile journey. So it's a very long journey. And your challenge, if you choose to accept it, is, and I hope you do, is to make the trip take less time. So reduce the time. If you remember the relationship between time, speed, and distance, you can say to me, well, let's try and cut the distance down. But one of the conditions or one of the constraints I'm going to place on your answers is that the distance has to remain the same. So how do you reduce time if the distance remains the same? And if you know the answer because you've seen it, perhaps in some innovative video, you've seen it on YouTube, please, no spoilers for everyone else. So please don't volunteer the answer if you already know it, only if you think that you don't know it and you want to guess it. So I would love to hear some thoughts. And this is about fixedness. And the clue is that to solve this problem of reducing the time that it takes, we have to break one of the major fixednesses that we have regarding train travel. Would anyone like to have a go? Remember, we can't change the line. And, oh, there's another condition. You must pick up and let go of the same number of passengers at the stations as you did before. So you can't just say, I'm going to have less passengers and hence the journey will be faster. So any ideas? Anyone wants to venture? And please don't be afraid to think this one through. It's a great little opportunity to have a go. And there are no such thing as strange or silly answers. I'm very curious for strange and silly answers. They're usually the most inventive and creative. Anyone on your side, Rajiv, offering anything? Because they're very quiet here. No one's typing anything on this side. I would love to hear. I can see this. Who do I see here? Let me just check in the audience. I see we have with us, we have Charlotte, we have Francis. I would love for you to put into chat what you think would be the answer for making this train journey take less time, for making it quicker. Robin, if you're there, Uday, Vipin. All right, I see no one wants to volunteer. You can even ask questions. You know, chat is good for asking questions as well. Oh, here we go. We have some messages coming through. Increase the speed. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Robin. That is a great answer. When you only have distance, time, and speed as your variables, and your distance is a constant, then you need to increase the speed. The question is, what kind of speed are you looking to increase? Most people think it is the maximum speed. And Jen, I like the answer from Anjaneyulu. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Reducing the stop time. Reducing the stop time is a great answer because it's coming much closer to what we're looking at. It's about increasing. If we reduce stop time, we're actually increasing average speed, which is what we want to increase. Just buying a faster train is obviously not a very inventive solution. Any ideas of how we can reduce the stop time to a bare minimum? Or maybe that's where our fixedness is. All right, so I'm going to see if we can move forward. I'm not seeing a lot of people volunteering, and please, once again, don't be embarrassed to answer. I think your answers are all going to be very, very interesting and worthwhile. So the same with your questions. So let's have a quick look at how the Chinese prototype solved this problem. Oh, here we go. Vipin, parallel trains for taking passengers for the stops. Right. Definitely getting to the solution using more efficient methods like magnetic levitation. Right. So I just want to make that's great. So I just want to make a quick distinction between the kind of innovation we're looking for here, which is revolutionary innovation, something that's really going to blow us off the map, versus incremental innovation or efficiency-based innovation. So we can make the train a little bit more efficient, but I'm looking for something that's going to really make a major change and really increase our average speed. Right, if trains don't need to stop completely, that's fantastic. Then we've solved the problem. So I think, and Janu, if you haven't seen the answer, congratulations, you're doing very well. That is in fact the answer, is our train don't stop. So we will say that our trains don't stop, but we still have to pick up and let go of passengers. And this is what I want to do now. I want to share with you the Chinese solution for this specific problem with a train that doesn't stop but still fulfills its other requirements regarding the passengers. So let's have a look at that. I'm going to make sure the sound is connected. Yes, it is. You may not get sound in the beginning. There's only sound at the very end. Let's have a look at this video. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can type in chat even though whilst it's playing. So let's have a look, shall we? Right, so you can actually see what's happening here. There's a carriage waiting for the train to come and pick it up on a second floor, whilst it leaves behind the previous carriage that it picked up in the previous station. So it never has to stop. And the reason it doesn't have to stop is because the people are already waiting.
武昌车站到了，请大家按先后秩序下车。
So I'm going to quickly do a stop there and take us back to our original deck. I can hear some background noise. If there's anyone who's not muted, if you could please mute yourself, or we can please make sure that everyone is muted, that would be great. It's just a little bit of a background noise there. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So let's just go back to our deck, and I'll bring the chat feature back on. Otherwise, I can't see what you are writing to me. Let's have a look at that. All right. And where is that chat feature? Come on. You can come down. There you are. And let's bring it up. Chat. Wonderful. One moment. Just please bear with me. All right. No, you disappeared. All right. Just give me 1 second. It's really important for me to be able to see what you're chatting and what you're putting into chat. And for that, I need to be able to see the chat. So what has happened to it there? That's very strange. All right, so that sometimes happens. I'm going to see if I can stop the share and the chat will come back. All right, there it is there. And now let's hopefully bring it back with the screen. Zoom sometimes does play up, unfortunately. That's just part of what we have to cope with. All right, wonderful. And now the chat should be up, I hope. Otherwise, it's going to be very funny not be able to see what you are writing. Okay. Well, this is probably the longest time it's taking me to bring chat back. Oh, I know why it's not showing. There it is. Wonderful. Okay, good. Trains don't need to stop completely. They don't need to stop at all, Anjan. And that's the fixedness that I want to speak about. We are so used because all of us, I'm assuming, or at least most of us, have caught trains at some point in our life, that we know that to get on and off a train, the train must stop. Here, the constraint or the fixedness that was broken is that the train will never stop. Of course, once you do that, you have to solve it from an engineering point of view. So it's not enough to say our trains aren't going to stop. You have to work out what to do so that you can still make the system work. And that's what we saw in this example. So I want to use this to introduce two concepts that we'll have a quick look at in a moment. That are two of the five main methodologies of SIT, and these are subtraction and division. So subtraction looks to remove a key component or a key functionality of your product or service to actually make it more innovative. Now, it's very counterintuitive, right? Would you agree with me? Please put a smiley face if you agree with the following statement. Just put a smiley face into chat if you agree with the statement that normally people think that to innovate, they need to provide additional features or more features and more components. Just drop in a smiley face into your chat if you agree with that statement. Because what we are saying is actually the opposite. We're saying it's actually possible, as we're seeing here, and so we'll see in some additional examples, to become innovative by actually reducing the functionality and removing functionality. So I know that sounds strange, but we're going to look at that. Division is about moving components around to different positions in a product or a system, or moving steps around in a service process. We'll have a look at some examples of both of those. All right, wonderful. And I do hear some background noise again. So maybe if we can mute, maybe it's new arrivals with the speakers open. That would be great. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. So just a few words before we start. As was rightly said, I had spent almost more than 5.5 years heading internal innovation at Amdocs, which is an organization that I'm sure I so would appreciate if there was a mute on the.
I am muting them.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. All right, so yes, 5 years as heading, 5+ years heading innovation at Amdocs, internal innovation, so not open innovation, but internal innovation, creating a culture of innovation within the company. In this picture, you can see we took 200 VPs from all over the world, flew them to Israel for the purpose of running design thinking workshops with them on intercompany challenges that related to the company. Since I left, I've been consulting various organizations, top-tier organizations around the world, providing workshops and training. You can see some of them here. Some of the most interesting work that I've done was with Ernst & Young, with Intel, with SanDisk, with various financial and academic institutions as well as with Israel's aerospace industries and Ministry of Education and Foreign Ministry as well. I am very proud and honored to be able to teach Ivy League courses through Emeritus, which is a bunch of Ivy League schools that have come together to create a online structure. And I also have taught MBA at various universities around the world, in Israel and in Australia. All right, let's talk a little bit about SIT. So can you put a smiley face if you've heard of SIT before, or if you had a chance to use it? Just so I know if there's any familiarity with the system. If you haven't, that's totally fine. But if you have, that's very, very interesting. I don't see any smiley faces coming up. That's totally fine.
We have got lots smiley faces on the platform as well.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So that's what I can't be seeing. Thank you so much, Vijeta, for telling me that. So great. So SIT actually has Russian origins, right? It's based on TRIZ, which is a system of innovation created by Gendrik Altschuler in the 20th century in the Soviet Union. He was a former Soviet naval officer in charge of patents. And what he noticed was something very interesting. He noticed that successful patents that actually passed the review of his office shared common patents. And he started examining what those common patents are. And he created what is known in English as the theory of inventive problem solving, which, by the way, you can study. It takes quite a while to get your mind around it. It's quite complex, and it is predominantly for engineers. What we have here in SIT, which was developed by Professor Jacob Goldenberg in Israel in the mid-90s, is a much simplified version of that is something that everybody can use. Without necessarily having an engineering background. So if you haven't read the book, I strongly recommend the Inside the Box book, which is based on thinking inside the box by Professor Goldenberg, who I am proud to say was my professor when I was doing my MBA at the IDC, and I learned directly from him, and we're still in touch, and he's a really wonderful and very interesting man. And so if you're interested in this topic, and you are more than welcome to connect with him as well. All right, I want to take you through some of the main features of the main, let's call them infrastructural features of SIT, so that when we look at the 5 templates, you will understand, you'll have a better grounding and understanding of what these templates are actually sitting on top. The first thing I want to talk about is function follows form and form follows function. So if you have ever done business requirement gathering, or you've ever been involved in product creation or service creation, then you are intuitively familiar with form follows function. Form follows function actually is the way we work. And I'll explain what it means. Form follows function means that whenever we want to create something, i.e. the form, we first ask ourselves, what's the functionality we would like? So in this example here, where you can see a beautiful little hut, luxurious hut, probably in the Maldives, I think that's where it's from. The functionality that we want is obviously an environment that provides closeness to water, that is simple yet elegant, and that provides great holiday feel. And if you gave all those conditions and requirements, if you gave that functionality, you would probably be very happy with the form that you're seeing here. Now, imagine for a moment that instead you had a totally different functionality that you wanted. You wanted functionality of a building that would house hundreds of employees in a very small signature of land space. Chances are you will receive something like this from your architect. So once again, the form, this time a office building, follows the functional requirements that we prescribed. That's how we all work. We gather business requirements, and based on those business requirements, we create the form, or the software, or the product, or the service, or whatever it may be. SIT takes that and twists it on its head. So it says, let's do, instead of form follows function, let's do function follows form. Now, what does function follows form mean? Function follows form means that instead of breaking our head of how to innovate, we have a starting point. And that starting point is, more often than not, our own existing products and services. So I want to give you some very simple examples to illustrate the idea of function follows form. The idea, I'll just repeat it one more time, is that you take an existing form, you change, sometimes you break the form to see what new functionality you can create. Okay, so let's take the bicycle. You're all familiar with the humble bicycle, and let's remove a wheel. By the way, this is the first template of SIT. It's known as subtraction, where you subtract a key component from a product or a key step from a process in a service, and then you try and see if you can do anything with what is left, or you're also allowed to replace the subtracted component. So here, I don't know if anyone has any ideas of what you would replace the wheel with, but here's one solution that that is very, very creative and inventive, right? Because now, instead of pushing a lawnmower with your bare hands, you can connect it to your bike instead of the front wheel, and you can ride around and mow the lawn very, very easily. What happens if we take away two wheels? Any ideas? Any thoughts about what new functionality you can get from a form of a bicycle that's missing two wheels? Clearly, you can't travel with it anymore, right? That functionality is gone. So with one wheel, we saw you can mow the lawn. With two wheels, we can have other options. So we can, some people say generate electricity is some of the responses I get. Yes, exactly. And exercise bike is the answer that I was actually looking for. So thank you, Anjen, for that. And you can see that, right? You can have an exercise bike without actually having any wheels. So this is an example of how changing the form, milk for grains, Vishal, thank you. That's another great idea. So by changing the form, we are creating new functionality, right? And so long as the functionality is new and it is useful, then it meets our test for being innovative, because we say something is innovative when it's both new and when it is provides value, right? When it has use to at least one of our stakeholders or to ourselves. All right, I want to take you through some additional examples of subtraction. I think you'll like these. Again, because they are so counterintuitive, right? And because we believe that that to give innovative solutions, we must give more and more functionality. I'm going to prove to you that actually reducing functionality and removing components changing the form can create new functionality. This example of the Motorola Mango. I don't know if what the ages are of my audience here. I can tell you my age is almost 50, and I remember in the 90s how expensive phone calls were on cell phones. I'm assuming it was the same in your country. Today, in most countries, you can buy a plan and speak for as long as you want, and you're not priced by the minute. But if you remember back in the 90s, phone calls are very expensive. They cost by the minute. And parents who wanted to keep in touch with their children as a way of keeping them safe would get what we call in the telecommunication industry, they would get a bill shock, right? I'm sure you are familiar with the concept of bill shock. They wanted to be able to speak to their kids, but instead they found that their kids are just their teenage kids are making hour-long phone calls to all their friends, and they would get thousands of dollars as a bill. So what the Motorola Mango did is something that is so counterintuitive that none of us would actually think of doing that. They removed probably the most important component / functionality of a cell phone. Can someone would you like to type into chat what is one of the most important features or components of a cell phone? It's the ability to do what? To dial numbers. Thank you, Anjan. Why Anjan and Vishal, first of all, congratulations to both of you for participating so much. I encourage everybody to also participate and type into chat. So yes, Jen, you are absolutely right. They took the ability to dial out, and that means that kids could not dial out to their friends. Of course, they left the ability to dial the police and the ambulance and the emergency services. This is something that's internationally required. And they also left one number that the kids could dial. There's only one number. Anyone wants to guess what was that one number that kids were allowed to dial? Absolutely right, Vishal. Thank you. The parents. And do you think that they spoke to the parents for hours and hours when they dialed them? I think if anyone who says yes to that probably doesn't, their kids are not teenagers yet, but teenagers usually don't want to speak for hours to their parents, and they will have a very quick call and say, hello, I'm okay, don't worry about me, bye. And that way there was a massive value for the parents because their bill was reduced by about 99%. So what happened here? What happened here was that a component was removed. The ability to make outgoing calls was removed. This is changing the form, and that led to a new functionality. This is no longer a cell phone, ladies and gentlemen. This is now a tracking device for keeping track of your children, because it's definitely not a cell phone. It doesn't have the functionality of a cell phone to be able to call anyone you wanted to. All right, we saw some other tech examples over the years. So with the Apple phone, anyone knows what was removed here? I think it was the iPhone 7 about 2 years ago. Anyone remember what was subtracted from the iPhone 7? That is a really important aspect. It wasn't the wires. It wasn't the keyboard. The iPhone 7. The clue is to do with the headphones, the Bluetooth headphones. The audio jack was subtracted. That's right, Michelle. Thank you very much. So they've removed the audio jack and made it impossible to use a wireline headphone. You had to use the Bluetooth headphone, and that had a number of major advantages for Apple. One of them was they could make the phone thinner, because the audio jack diameter actually was larger than the phone needed to be. The other one, of course, is they could force everybody to buy Apple Bluetooth headphones and create another great line of business for themselves. Twitter did a similar thing, right? Twitter, if you remember when it came out, what was the constriction? What was the restraint there? They removed your ability to write unlimited text, and they limited you to 144 characters, didn't they? And then it was increased to 288. But that's still very, very limiting. I love this product here because so many people are vegetarian, and meat, the production of meat has major negative environmental impacts in the globe. This is not vegetable substitute for meat. This is subtracting the animal from the meat. Now you may ask yourself, how is that possible? This is done through stem cell growth, where the steaks and the meat is actually grown in a lab without the need for any animals to be created, purely cells for that beef or for that lamb. I actually asked my vegetarian friends if they would eat animal-free meat, and so far not a single one had said yes. They all said they would continue being vegetarian simply because they don't want the taste of meat, even if there was no animal. And I think if there are any vegetarians here, I'm guessing your response will be the same. You will not eat it even though there was no animal there. And I can totally understand that. I think there's some crazy ideas here, but they're all financially successful. So I just want to quickly go through a few of these with you. So this actually came out only a couple of weeks ago. I picked this up from the US. Cinnabon, which is those pastries that they have in the United States that have frost covering them, have removed the cinnamon bun, and now you can buy the frosting all by itself. Now that may not seem very innovative, but this has proved to be a huge additional income earner for the Cinnabon company, because now people will buy the Cinnabon frosting for additional foods and not just buns. So here's a very simple idea that was proved to be a multi-million-dollar idea for this company. COVID, I've got a few COVID examples for you. I don't know if you know of these. If you've seen any of these, I would love to see a smiley face, just to know that we have come across these together. This is from a restaurant. In a restaurant, because of social distancing in the United States, in Washington, they decided to fill in the gaps between the diners, and the diners had to have gap tables between them with mannequins. So they removed the people because of social distancing. They had to by law, but they replaced them with mannequins to give the restaurant a more full feel. Usually, when I teach this to my MBA students, a lot of them say this is really creepy, and they will not want to eat in a restaurant like this. Any of you would eat here? Would you eat in a restaurant that is got half the population full of mannequins, or would it disturb you? And Vishal is saying he would, and Abik is saying and they would, and most people don't mind. Interesting, very interesting culturally, because in a lot of my other students said that that it would just be too freaky and creepy, and they wouldn't like to eat with mannequins sitting next to them. Very interesting, very interesting. I don't know if you heard of this. This is also quite interesting from a COVID perspective. As we know, we cannot fly during COVID. So what Taiwan Airport has done, it's offering pretend to go abroad airport tours, where you can actually go through the entire process of getting on a plane, and you eat your food on the plane, and you go through customs and security and duty free, but you don't actually take off and fly anywhere. Why would this be useful? Well, that's probably a great question if you're asking that. It was useful for Taiwan Airport because it had done some major changes and major renovations and upgrades of its systems, and it wanted to test those systems whilst the planes were grounded. The way that it did that is it offered duty-free gifts and other benefits to people who are willing to take the airport tour, so long as they gave also feedback and so long as they could observe their reaction as they're going through the airport. Other airlines took this further. Qantas, which is the airline of Australia, where I live, and a number of other airlines have actually started flights to nowhere. Have you heard of this in your country? Do you have flights to nowhere? So this is people who really are missing flying so much, they're willing to fly literally to nowhere. So the plane gets up in the air, does a big circle for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. During this time, people can take pictures. I mean, Rajiv, yes, I mean literally nowhere. The flight goes up in the air and lands in the same place that it took off from. The idea is that that people who are missing flying so much get to have their flying experience. They get to eat their lunch on board, and everything is just like a normal flight, except that the plane returns and lands where it landed. Now, that may sound absolutely crazy to you, and you will probably say, I mean, quick survey here. Would you spend money on a ticket just to be able to go on a flight and come back to where you took off from, just to experience flight? Just a quick yes or no. No, I got to tell you that I wouldn't. As someone who flies quite a bit for corporate reasons, I don't need to pay money to get into a plane just to experience being on a plane. But maybe for some people, it's good, and a big, yeah, it's good for maintaining the planes as well. But again, I just want to share with you that removing something like having a destination isn't stopping this from being successful business. In fact, flights were sold out in Australia, in Canada, I think it was in Singapore as well. A whole number of countries have done this, and it's proved very, very successful. I guess what that means is there are people who really miss the experience of flying, and they don't really care if they don't fly anywhere specifically, so long as they get to fly. All right, now, how many people here enjoy a good mathematical quiz? I hope you do, because I know that I do. And I'm going to give you this quiz, and I'm very interested, and everyone can participate here. I'm very interested in your answer. Now, when you give an answer, please give a few words explanation about why you chose that answer. I want you to do the following, please. I want you to look at the numbers on the screen. Now, by the way, if you know this, if you've seen this in another presentation, or you've seen this in a quiz book, please don't give the answer, because I'm asking for no spoilers. So only give an answer if you have not heard this question before. And I'm going to repeat the question. Have a look at the numbers that you're seeing on the screen, and tell me, please, which of those numbers does not belong? Which one is the one that's different from all the others? Could you please type that in? And unfortunately, I can't see the people who are joining on the system. I can only see people who are joining on chat. But I'd love to see some of the answers. So we've got Naveen with 13. Why 13, Naveen? And anyone else, please feel free to answer, to give me your answer, but just give a few words of why you chose that answer. It's the odd one out. Why is it the odd one out? I'm trying to understand why 13. That is the question. Which one is the one that doesn't belong? But I'm not sure why. And what about the rest of you? So Naveen has gone forward and given an answer. I'd love to see just a few more answers, just so we can get some critical mass so I can comment about the numbers. You don't need to overthink it. Just have a look at the screen, have a look at the numbers, tell me which one doesn't belong. Okay, Uday is saying 17, wonderful. I would love to know, Uday, why you chose 17, or sum is 9. The sum is 9, others is 10. Oh, I see. Or do I? The sum of all the 3 numbers in a row is 9. I'm sorry, I would have thought it's 12 and 7. But that's okay. It's definitely interesting thinking, and I'm still getting a lot of background noise. It'd be great if we can mute that, please. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. All right. So we've had 17. We've had 13. 13 because it's considered unlucky. Okay, that's great. At least that's interesting logic. No, I totally accept that. That's all good, Uday. Ignore 1, then 3 and 9 are multiple, 7 is different. All right, let me give you the answer because I think we should progress forward. The answer is 2. And I have given this to senior managers, this quiz, to middle managers, to employees. And I need to tell you that almost 99.9% of the time, people do not get this right. People guess either 17, 19, or 13. No one says 2, even though 2 clearly is the only number that is even. All the other numbers here are odd. So the question is, why does nobody say 2? And the reason is that nobody looks at 1, 2, 3 as being part of the game. Everyone thinks that there are only 3 numbers participating in this quiz, the numbers 17, 19, and 13. Is this what you thought? And please don't be ashamed of saying yes, because that's what I thought when I first saw it. I didn't see 1, 2, 3. They were invisible to me. I looked only at 17, 19, and 13. Now, why do we do that? And by the way, imagine how much information we miss in our decision-making, and we don't include in our decision-making because we don't think it's part of the game. We think it's you've all assigned a specific functionality to 1, 2, and 3. And Abik is saying it's not fair to count the serial number. In other words, I'm assuming Abik is saying it's not fair to count 1, 2, and 3. But listen to my instructions very carefully once again. I didn't say which of the 3 numbers is the one that doesn't belong. And I was very careful not to say the odd one, because that can be confusing as well. I said which of the numbers on the screen. And there are 6 numbers on the screen: 1, 17, 2, 19, 3, and 13. Now, we all miss it, and we miss it because of functional fixedness. Functional fixedness says that we assign specific functionality to products, to services, to components of services, and we don't see any other functionality. And Robin, meanwhile, is saying 1 is the only number which is not prime. Okay. I thought prime is a number that can be divided by itself, only by itself and by 1. And I think 1 can be divided by itself and can be divided by 1. But I could be wrong. This is my poor mathematical upbringing. All right, so we are seeing, I hope everyone understands why 2 is the choice. 2 is the only even number on the screen. It's also the number that everyone ignored together with 1, 2, and 3. So the lesson learned here is that we have to often re-examine the function and see if we can assign new functionality to existing objects, products, services, processes, tools, etc. And I want to show you some examples of division, which is the next template we're going to look at, because division does something very similar. Division takes and takes components out of a system and places them in a different physical location. So you've got a speaker, which you're all familiar with, the JBL speaker, that actually is a speaker that's been removed from you conceptually removed from a stereo, and now you can have it anywhere. A CD top that's been removed, so it would be more secure and less likely to be stolen. Here you have an example of the controls for the boat that have been moved from the boat to the handle of the water skier, right? All of this is about moving components in a product to a different location in space in order to create value. And that's what division is. And Amazon Dash, we'll see if we have time for that a bit later on. I might skip this little film here just because of time. Speaking of time, IKEA, do you have IKEA in your country? If you do, wonderful, then you know what I'm talking about. And what was the division innovation that IKEA did? What step of the process did it move from one location to another to create innovation? I think if you're familiar with IKEA, you will know that what they moved was the assembly of the furniture. So normally furniture is first assembled and only then sold, isn't it? Whereas here, what you're seeing is that you have a business idea that moved the step of putting the furniture together to the end, and this is called time-based division, right? It's looking at it as a process. And is it innovative? So did IKEA, by doing that, did it do something new? Well, it definitely was new at the time that IKEA came up with it. And did it create value? Absolutely, it created value. It was able to first of all reduce the amount of space it needed to store furniture in the warehouse where people came to buy, because it was all flattened. And also it created value in that it reduced the cost of production. And additional value it created is that it allowed people to feel like they were building furniture, even though they were just following Swedish instructions and just putting it together. Some COVID-based division. You can see how we can apply division in a COVID situation to solve our social distancing problems. Here, it's simply changing the configuration of the seats in the airplane that will allow us to have much better social distancing. Very, very simple changing of position. And I'm going to skip that. Maybe we can come back to it just because we do have a lot to cover. I might skip a few exercises. Multiplication is a wonderfully powerful tool as well. What it says is find a key component and copy it and change something about it. Febreze did that because they noticed that when people were buying their air fresheners for toilets and bathrooms, people started complaining that it wasn't working. And do you know why they said that it wasn't working? The reason why is that people's noses got used to the smell. So people got used to the smell of the perfume or of the deodorant, and they would call up the company and say, excuse me, your Febreze product doesn't work. But that's simply because they couldn't smell it anymore. So what Febreze did is it copied the most important component, the component that gives the smell, the liquid, but it changed it in a major way. It gave it a different smell. So the air freshener would switch between the two smells, and so the humans who were using this, the people who were using this, never got used to the smell. Are you familiar with these pens from the 80s? I remember as a kid, as a teenager, when they came out, we were all so excited by these pens, right? Because now we could have 4 different colors in a single pen. And it was really super cool. If you were a kid in the 80s and even in the 90s, you must have thought this was a really cool product. And you know, these pens are still selling today. These pens are great examples of multiplication, because what have they done? They took a key component of a pen, which is the ink in the ink cartridge, and they copied it. They copied it 3 times. But it's not enough just to copy it. You have to change it. Now, what attribute of the ink did they change to make this an innovative product? Right? So they took the ink, but there was something about the ink that was different in every one of the, and it was the color, exactly. So you can see what a powerful tool multiplication is. And you can probably start thinking at the end of this session, how can I apply these to my business, to the work that I'm doing, to perhaps create innovative products simply by multiplying a component. In this case, it was ink. You're probably thinking, well, that's a bit of a 1980s example, Ellie. Can you give us something a little bit more up to date? And my answer is yes. Have a look at two-factor authentication. You must all be familiar with two-factor authentication. Anyone who has a Google Gmail account would have had to have done two-factor authentication at some point. What's happening here? What's the component that's being duplicated, that's being copied? It's the password control. It's the way the password system works, isn't it? So it's being copied so that you don't just enter by yourself a password. That's the original one. But in the copy, what's being changed? What's being changed is the process for entering the code, right? And the process requires you to receive a one-time password through your cell phone. I mean, there are other ways of doing two-factor authentication, obviously. This is a great example of multiplication because you're creating value by multiplying a step in a process or a component, but of course changing it. Would there be any point in multiplying without changing the attributes? So you enter a password and now they ask you, okay, enter your second password. Would that provide, do you think, any additional security? Maybe a little bit. I think most people would probably find that quite annoying if you had to enter one password followed by another password. Would you find that annoying? Just by a simple pass? I would scratch my head and say, well, what are we trying to do here? But if it's done in a different way through your phone, you know that there is additional authentication here, because chances are that whoever is hacked into your system, if that happened, then they wouldn't have access to your phone, hopefully, and would do. Yeah, biometric, yes, wonderful, Vishal. So biometric would be a third authentication factor. So you may have maybe now 3 authentication factors, or maybe just 2 of them, or maybe just the one. But biometric is the same concept. We're doing a password, but we're changing the way the password works. Here, the password is actually the information contained in our eye or in our thumb, for example. Okay, that's where the password information is coming from. All right, so that's wonderful. We are really getting through these. I've got a couple more to take you through. Template number 4 is known as task unification. It's really very interesting because what it does and what it says is, let's take a component, and as well as it doing its original task, let's see if we can give it an additional task. This is sometimes known as doubling up or doing a piggyback. And what this picture shows us is a glove that was created probably at least, I would say, 10, 15 years ago, in the days when Bluetooth devices were still very, very much in their infancy. And the problem they're trying to solve is that there is intensely cold weather in Scandinavian countries. I think this was either Swedish or Danish product. I'm not quite sure. I need to double check that. And what they said is as well, by the time that people take off their gloves to answer their phone, they often miss the phone call and they have to call the person back, and it's quite annoying. So what they did is they placed the functionality inside the glove. So the glove still acts as a glove. It keeps its original function, but now it also acts as a Bluetooth phone. So again, probably you will agree it's superseded by later technology, but as a concept, it's a very interesting concept. In South Africa, they used task unification to create a way for village women to be able to bring water back to their villages without having to work a difficult mechanical pump. And the way they did that is they created a merry-go-round for kids to play on. And as the kids played, they actually activated a pump that brought water up into the water tower and then provided water for the village women. They actually had a third task, and that was displaying advertisements on the water tower. Okay, so task unification is how can you maintain the original functionality of your product, but actually now give it a new functionality. And the original functionality of the children's playground equipment has been maintained. Kids can still play with it, but whilst they're playing with it, they're actually doing something useful for society by pumping water. So just very quick word about how this ended. This was a United Nations sponsored project in South Africa that they thought of taking to other developing countries where there are problems in water consumption and access to water. Ultimately, it failed, and it failed for two very interesting reasons. One was because it was often too successful. The water was pumped out really well. It was a lot more water was taken out than normally is, and the groundwater, the bore water, ran out very, very quickly, much quicker than it did when it was done manually. The second problem was that often the kids didn't want to play. And so when the village women would force the kids to play, the kids would complain and refuse to play on the merry-go-round, and there was no water being pumped. So it just goes to show us, if you're trying to force kids to play, it's not really play, is it? As far as they're concerned, it's work. Fuse card is another great idea for task unification. What the fuse card did was it allowed you to place all your cards, whether it is your ID card, your credit card, your library card, your transportation card, your employee card. You could place all your cards on a single card. So you wouldn't have to have a very fat wallet. You actually don't need a wallet at all. You can just slip it into your shirt pocket or your pants pocket, and there's definitely value there. Another sad ending to this startup idea. It was a great idea. It failed, but not because it wasn't a good idea. It failed because of execution and security. It didn't quite get the security right. But the idea itself is a great idea. All right, any questions so far about anything? I've noticed there aren't a lot of questions being popped up. If you have a question, you know what? We actually have Q&A for the end. I just remembered in about 5-10 minutes, we're gonna have Q&A. So that's fine. Let's hold off on those questions, and then I'll take you through the last template, and then we'll do a quick Q&A session with the people on chat and the people on the system that is being moderated as well. All right, so attribute dependency. Why have I got a picture of a chameleon there? Well, because one of the best ways to discover innovative solutions to problems is by looking at nature and by examining nature and animals. Anyone knows what that's called? When we copy the way that animals and nature behaves, the way biology behaves, in order to innovate new products and services and solve problems. Anyone knows what that term is? So we call that biomimicry. Right? We are actually mimicking the way the biology works. And Stanford University, where I did one of my courses, is got a leading lab for biomimicry, where it actually creates robotic solutions based on the way that animals such as chameleons and lizards and various bugs and other animals behave. So it's very, very interesting. So attribute dependency is the final one. Attribute dependency. The reason I'm showing you the chameleon is because the chameleon has a very special feature. It's able to change the color of its skin. And if anyone is a biologist here, they'll probably tell me that that's not exactly true. I did look up on Google and try to understand how it does it. It's not really changing the color of its skin. It's changing the color of the spaces between cells. It's quite complex. It was a little bit above my head, so I'm not even going to try to explain it, but the effect is what's important here. The effect is the color of its skin will change depending on the background, on the color of the background. And this is what attribute dependency says. Let's have a look at some animal examples. This coffee cup, as you can see here, is very interesting because it uses the chameleon situation, but in a different way. The chameleon's power in a different way. The lid of the coffee, the takeaway coffee, changes from brown to red when the liquid is poured in, because red represents very hot and dangerous. And once the temperature falls back down to an acceptable level, it goes back to being brown. So the color is actually acting as an indicator on whether or not it's safe to drink the coffee. And so we've got a dependency here between the temperature of the coffee and the color of the lid. We can actually try and create new dependencies and change and innovate products using what's known as the attribute matrix. And you can see here that what we do is we ask ourselves, we look at different attributes of the product and external attributes that are related to it. For example, the age of the customer is an external attribute. The country where it's sold, it's an external attribute. And we ask ourselves, is there currently a relationship? Is there a dependency? So when you're buying a takeaway cup of chai or a takeaway cup of coffee, is there currently a relationship between the color of the lid and the temperature of the liquid? Does the temperature of the liquid affect the color of the lid? Has anyone bought a cup of hot drink with this feature? I can tell you that the answer is 0. It's not here. This is a binary question. The answer can either be 0 or 1. So if there is no relationship, there is no dependency, you put 0. If there is, then you can put in 1. It all depends on what is the truth, what is actually happening. Then what you do is you go through and you change your zeros to 1, and you create dependency where there wasn't, and you remove dependency where there was. I know it's a little bit of a difficult concept. This is something that when I teach this for Columbia Business School, this is actually a 2-month course of these different templates. So I totally understand if you don't get it straight away. I'll give you a few more examples, hopefully that will make it clearer. But this matrix of binary using zeros and ones is how we control for whether or not there are currently relationships between the various attributes, and then we can go and change them and see if that leads us to any innovative solutions. I want to give you some examples around the world of attribute dependency. In Samoa, there is a major weight problem, a lot of obesity for the native Samoans. And what Samoa Airline did, because as you probably know, airlines cost is very much dependent on fuel consumption, they made the price of a ticket dependent on the weight of the passenger. So overweight passengers had to pay a lot more money than skinny passengers. This was, by the way, great news for parents, because if you're a parent and your child is 2 years old and one day, you will be paying full adult price the moment they are above 2 years old. Whereas if you're paying for your 2-year-old by the kilo, that's great news for you as a parent, because your cost has just gone down by about 80%. So, spoiler of what actually happened here, the Samoan High Court ruled that this was discriminatory and unconstitutional and banned Samoa Airline from being able to institute this pricing policy. A couple of examples. This one is from Tokyo, Japan. In this bar in Tokyo, the Japanese bar offered discounts to its lady guests based on how high the heels of the shoes were. So the higher your heel, the more discount you get off your cocktails. And the idea here, of course, was to influence the behavior of its female patrons to wear high heels. I'm assuming that this was in the hope of attracting male customers who will be spending more money on the drinks and the alcohol. So they created a dependency between the price of a drink and the size of your high heel if you were a female customer. The last one I want to leave you with before we go into the question is from Moscow in Russia. And we are very familiar with situations, I think you probably are familiar with situations where the virtual world, the internet world, takes takes examples from the physical world and copies them into the virtual world. This startup in Moscow did the opposite. They went from the virtual world and they used the concept of the virtual world in the physical world. This is what they did. They said, why should billboards just randomly show ads? They placed a camera on all their billboards, and that camera would feed into an algorithm that looked at the type and age of cars that are driving towards the billboard. And if on average these were considered to be expensive, high-class cars, then the ads were for luxury goods, for holidays, right? It is physical, it is phygital, right? Physical and digital advertising. All right, so this is interesting, and also, of course, because the ads were sold within seconds in real live auctions, just like they are on your cell phone. When you see a video ad on your cell phone, that ad was sold to you in the milliseconds by automated systems in the milliseconds before you actually saw it. So that's attribute dependency used in a physical space. Very, very interesting, because it creates the dependency between the type of advertising that's being displayed and the value of the cars that are heading towards the billboard. All right, I will be sharing this deck with the good people here and in Incubate Hub. And so if you're interested in that, we can send that, Incubate Hub can send that to you. And what I've left you with is a take-home exercise, which you can do, and totally up to you whether you want to do it on a sport or a cultural event. I know that cricket is, just like it is big in Australia, it's obviously very big in India and in some other countries. You can do it on cricket, you can do it on football, you can do it on a rock concert or a classical concert, whatever you like. Create a matrix, have a look at dependencies inside the sport or inside a cultural event, and see if you can create new dependencies and innovate the sport. I'll just give you a quick example of basketball. I know that most of you probably don't follow basketball, but in 1978, there was a major innovation in basketball that used attribute dependency. Now, if you are a follower of basketball, you probably will jump up and say, you know what it is. The answer was, it was a three-point rule. So to stop teams just sending people to shoot underneath the basket, which was considered quite boring, they created a rule that said if you are far away enough from the basket, outside what's known as the three-point area, then every shot you take actually gets 3 points and not 2. And this provided an incentive for players to take faraway shots. So this is attribute dependency actually innovating a sport. All right, so here's a recap of the templates we saw today: subtraction, division, multiplication, task unification, and the last one we just looked at is attribute dependency. Thank you all very much. Thank you to Incubate Hub for inviting me. We now have about 25 minutes for questions. If you're interested in asking questions, you are through the Incubate system, Rajiv will moderate questions and read them out to me because I can't see the system. If, however, you are on Zoom chat, you are more than welcome to ask questions using the Zoom, and I'll be more than happy to answer those questions as well. And this is really the advantage of attending a live session. You get to ask questions, and I'm very, very curious and interested in your questions. So thank you all very, very much for taking part in this session, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed sharing it with you. But yeah, it would be wonderful if there was any questions that you had about maybe how you can apply this for your business, especially in a COVID environment. We saw some examples of that. Are there any questions, Vijeta or Rajiv, coming from your
thanks a lot,
system?
Thanks a lot for this session, and I think it's 10 o'clock in the night at your place.
I see. Really? It's 11. You're close.
Okay. Thanks a lot for being there till so late. Thanks a lot. Anybody, if you have any questions, you can put on your mic. I have got 3 questions in the system. I will ask them, but before that, if anybody has any questions, you can put on your mic and ask the question.
That's fine. You know what? Let's go through the 3 questions that you have right now, Rajiv, and then if anybody wants to add additional questions, they can either do it by voice or they can type it into chat as well.
Sure. So one of the question of Surendra is around that in the corporate setting with your experience, what has been your experience in the process to be followed to get a management buy-in for sponsoring a innovation project?
Sure. So the way that we did that in Amdocs, and the way that I recommend as best practice for my clients to get buy-in from management is that the process of coming up with a solution and even the choice of the challenge needs to be handled professionally. And the best way to handle it professionally is to have a dedicated innovation manager and an innovation team that will drive that process. And that means that there is a funnel and management is aware of this. Management lets the innovation manager and innovation team know what are the key challenges that the organization is facing. And then the innovation team will speak to the company or the specific departments in the company and launch normally an ideation campaign, or it could be a hackathon, or there are multiple ways of doing it. Incubate Hub is quite famous for the hackathons that you do, but we also did internal hackathons just like many corporates do at Amdocs and with my clients. But the best way to get buy-in is to ensure that, first of all, the challenge that the idea is answering is seen as a real challenge by management and not as something minor that the team that's come up with the idea just decided that should be the challenge. So that's number one. And for that, you need management, senior management, to communicate downstream to innovation manager and to the employees of the company what those strategic challenges are. And then the other way to get buy-in is to show that you have used best practices to answer real unmet needs, whether those are unmet needs of your employees or unmet needs of your customers or users or suppliers or partners or any stakeholder. You need to show that that your solution answers unmet needs, that there's a real need that's being answered, that it's possible to create this solution, and that it's financially feasible to move forward with that solution as well. And the best way to convince them of that and to get their buy-in is to show them value. So if you can show that you have some, even if you have freemium customers, if you have freemium subscribers, if you can show a proof of concept that shows that this product or prototype of this product is actually something that is desired and is used by people, and there's demand for it, even when it's free, you can do a lot more. And of course, if you can show first dollar, that's a great way of getting additional investment coming in and buying. But I just want to say last word about that, Rajiv, before we move on to the next question. It's really important that management sets aside money for when they do innovation, not just for the activities such as the hackathon and the ideation campaigns and other ways of creating ideas via ideation, but that they set money aside through an internal VC fund, venture capital fund, for incubating the idea, for taking it post-ideation into incubation, into further prototyping, into validation of assumptions, and into piloting to show that the idea actually has merit and should then be developed ultimately transferred to product management, whether it's a product or a service. Next question.
Yeah, so the next question is from Rohit. So if, as innovators, we are not in the millennial age group, then how do we innovate for the millennials? How do we ideate and innovate for the millennials? I think what
Sure.
The question. Yeah, you can go ahead. Yeah.
So I'm assuming if he's not in the millennial age group, he's either above 40 or he's less than 24 and he's in the Generation Z age group. And I think he's not in the Generation Z. I'm assuming he's older than the millennials. He's probably a Generation X like me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We're not talking to someone who's 20 years old. The answer is the great thing about using best practice innovation tools, such as SIT, such as design thinking, such as strategic innovation tools created by Professor Vijay Govindrajan, who is the leading guru of corporate innovation in the United States, and whose course I teach through the online university work that I do. The most important point to remember in these situations is that your tools are agnostic to your audience. What that means is that it doesn't matter whether you're trying to innovate for millennials or for Gen X or for baby boomers or for Gen Z. The process and tools are the same. You'll still need to understand what the unmet needs are. You still need to understand what the pain points are. So of course, the behavior of a millennial is going to be different to the behavior of a Gen Xer or to the behavior of a boomer. But the great thing about using best practice tools such as SIT, such as design thinking, is that you still, no matter who the market is that you're trying to understand and whose problems you're trying to solve, you still need to use the tools that will allow you to discover unmet needs, that will allow you to create solution concepts based on those unmet needs, and that you will work using the lean startup methodology as developed by as we know from Eric Rice and as expounded through design thinking, SIT, and other tools. And that startup lean startup methodology says that you always develop based on unmet needs, and you always will need to validate in an iterative way your assumptions, so that you are making sure that you're always making your products and services customer-centric and solving customer needs better than your competition. I hope that answered the question. Very long answer, I know, but there's a lot of issues there. So happy to give that long answer. Rajiv, any other questions?
Yeah, there's a last question. That is there any tools or framework to ascertain the budget of a particular innovation project?
So the tools that I teach in design thinking, for example, is net present value. So this is something that most people learn in their MBAs, or some people learn it in their finance degrees. Net present value allows you to look at your future expenses and your future cash flows and bring them back using discount rate to a value that takes into account the future value of money. And this is the main tool that the MIT uses and that I teach for the MIT Design Thinking course for ascertaining the financial viability of an innovative idea. And after we've worked, it's called, the system at MIT is called Real, Win, Worth It. Real means there's a real need. Win means it's technically feasible and can defeat the competition. And worth it means it's financially viable. Now, the worth it gateway is tested using a net present value analysis with a discount rate that's applicable to the risk level of the industry in which the idea is coming from or coming to solve. I hope that makes sense. If you're not familiar with those concepts because you don't have financial or MBA background, then my quick word to you is that it's not rocket science. None of this is that difficult if you sit down and learn it. Investopedia has got some great information on it, and there's a lot of information YouTube analysis for the Wharton gateway of ideation.
Okay, so
That's
that
it.
was all the questions that we had from the system.
Okay.
If there is any specific questions from anybody, we have 5-10 minutes more. Anything that you want to comment, anything you want to discuss, happy to take on the questions. You can put on the mic, and we can take one last question from any of the participants.
Okay, it looks like they seem to have followed and understood. My email is up there, and you are, of course, familiar with Rajiv's information. You're more than welcome to contact us. If you want to contact with a follow-up question, maybe something was unclear, you're more than welcome to write to me at eli.itten@northernstarinnovation.com, and I will be more than happy to answer you. Probably the best way is to connect with me via LinkedIn. This is how Rajiv and I first connected, via LinkedIn. And then I'm more than happy. I actually have been building over the years a document with links to the top innovation resources as well. So if that's something that's interesting for you, you're more than welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I am happy to share that with you as well. So that's pretty much it from me. I'll just sum up by saying, once again, thank you to Rajiv and the team at Incubate Hub for inviting me. As you can see, I'm very passionate about innovation, and even though my specialty is internal and not open innovation, the tools and systems are very similar throughout. The process is the same process. We want to create value. We want it to be new. We want it to bring value to ourselves and to our stakeholders. And we want to do it in a way that's going to be successful and reduce the risk as much as possible. So I think we are very lucky that in the year 2020, as we're coming towards 2020, we have best practices for doing that. Because I can tell you, as someone who started doing innovation more than 10 years ago, it was very poor in terms of best practices, and we're in a much, much different position today. So the more you know of these tools, the more you learn to use them, the more powerful your innovation will be. So thank you very much, and I wish you all great success, and I hope you get to practice SIT and other innovation tools, because there's no better way to innovate than by using proven best practice methodologies.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Eli. Thanks for your time. A very good night. We will be in touch.
Wonderful.
And we will follow up on any specific question that comes offline. We will definitely reach out to you. Thanks
Wonderful.
a lot for participating, all the participants, those who are in Zoom and those who are in the system. Have a good day and a good night to you, Eli.
Thank you very much. Daniel Ward. Bye to everyone.